Thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And can I add my thanks? I have to say, at a point where people are checking their watches, looking at the traffic news, thinking about what might lie ahead on a Friday evening, I'm just grateful that there's anybody here at all. So thank you very much for staying, and I'll do my best not to disappoint you. I've been here at the conference most of the day, and I get my energy from conferences like this. It's a fantastic opportunity for me. I try and avoid the bit about being persecuted by the emails that I'm being sent from people back at the museum, and spend some time actually soaking up what's going on. And I think if yesterday was anything like today, then this has obviously been a tremendous conference. There's an incredible energy and buzz, and I just wanted to congratulate Marie and everybody who's been involved in that. I think we should give them a round of applause. When I arrived in Canada 3 years ago, as many of you know, I hadn't lived in this country before. I'd visited once for another conference back in 2008. And so when I arrived, I was brand new to Toronto, I was brand new to Canada, I was brand new to the ROM, all at the same time. And within the first few weeks, I noticed that the Ontario Museums Association had a conference coming up. And so I thought, oh, that'll be good, because I'll be able to go and meet some people and start to understand how things work and how things stick. And I was really struck, I have to say, that year Nina Simon was giving an address at the OMA, and I thought, what an incredible organization that they have Nina Simon come. So I dragged half a dozen people from the ROM, and we came and we listened to the session. And so that was my first experience of OMA, and clearly it's going from strength to strength, which is great. So if I think about what's happened to me over the last 3 years, I was thinking about the fact that Marie gave me an incredible, with the program team, sort of amount of leeway as to what I should talk about today. And I thought, well, I could give you a blow-by-blow account of everything that I've done in the last 3 years, but I thought, no, that doesn't work on a Friday afternoon. I thought, well, I could just shamelessly give a bit of publicity for the ROM, and I might do a little bit of that, but I didn't think it was entirely appropriate, again, for me to just talk about the ROM. And so what I thought I would try and do is I thought I'd try and give my take on what I think are some of the conversations that you've been having over the last couple of days, and indeed we've all been having over the last 3 years. I thought what I could offer to this conference is how I think then that the ROM is also fitting into being disrupted by having to deal with many of the things that I think are happening right across the province and right across the sector and in cultural organizations across the whole world. And so put what we're thinking about doing next year for our centennial in the context of all that. The other thing that's happened over the last 3 years is I tend to wear these a little bit more often now, so I'm going to put them on at this point so I can read what I've written down here. So, if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. I think there's a number of different things that are happening in the museum world round about now. And all of these things are things that we know about and we've been talking about. And some of them we've been talking about, I have to say, I've been doing this for a while now. We've been talking about this since I started working in museums. We're all the time doing more with less. We're dealing with things now where the ways that we reach out to our audiences simply didn't exist a few years ago, and we're expected to do that, but we're expected to do all the things that we used to do as well. And we often have fewer financial resources with which to do it. We're getting better, I think, at demonstrating the impact that we have. There's been a lot of work that's come through the not-for-profit sector about things like demonstrating public value, about using theories of change, about being able to put together frameworks that show that we can test something out, that we can get proof of concept, and then we can scale it up. And I think we're all doing a lot more of that. I think then we're using that evidence base that we're building up, and we're getting a lot better at getting out there and putting our public case. I was fortunate enough to be part of a group that was at Harvard Business School a year or so ago. And there were people there from right across the nonprofit world. And a group of us from museums sat there listening to the people from the medical charities, from the United Way, from the international development organizations, all of whom were really clearly articulating the value that they brought to their community and why people should support them. And I remember talking to somebody, there was two of us from a museum and one of us from an orchestra, and we thought, what are we doing here? We can't compete with these people. And then we actually thought about it some more and we said we can. We don't have to try and compete with the people who are saving people's lives. We're the people who are enriching people's lives. We're the people who, within the community, are doing so much to bring about community cohesion, to build new engagement, to create people who are problem solving, who are listening, who are considering their own place. Actually, we do belong here, but we can learn from these people in how we present what we do and we demonstrate the value that comes from it. And I think the next thing follows from that, and I've heard it a lot today. We're all getting really good at building partnerships. I've always worked at larger museums. And one of the things that I would say about larger museums is that we have got better over the years at partnering. I remember a few years ago, I think it was Tom Hendry in Curator, in one of their anniversary editions, talking about the problem that he saw with natural history museums and other museums, which was that the very largest museums sat in the corner of the room like the gorilla and didn't have to join in with everybody else because they had the resources to do it on their own. Those days have gone. Those days have gone, and I think we all recognize now the value of partnerships, that we can't do it all ourselves, and that actually if we isolate ourselves from other organizations and the community around us, then we can't make the third of these points. We can't demonstrate the case that we can make for public value. So I think that these things now are the given. This is the world that we're working within. And that's good, because that's what we all need to understand, I think. So what comes after that then? What are the next things? Well, my sense is that in a time of enormous changes in society, when we're seeing industries one by one, particularly in the creative sector, the music industry, broadcast, publishing, be completely turned upside down, pulled apart, and remade. Within that, I think for the cultural sector, there's starting to be some clarity. And here I don't mean there's starting to be some clarity about the difference that new technology is going to mean for us. I think that, yes, there is starting to be some clarity around that, but I think there's also starting to be some clarity around how the disruptive effect of this technological change is starting to change everything that we do in terms of what our audiences are expecting, the way that we might put the product and the experiences together, the way that we might build our collections, the things that have always been at the core of what we do. And as it's Friday afternoon, I've taken the liberty of making up some words. But you'll hear about those in a few minutes. Let me just rattle through what I think is happening for all of us, and then I'll get to the made-up words. First thing is that information overload is here to stay. There is no way now that anybody can keep pace with everything that's happening in the world and use all the communication channels that are available to them to their full extent. None of us can do it. None of us can do it. Oh, I should press the button. Yes, thank you. Instant updates in real time are the norm. I'm not going to take the opportunity to say anything about the mayor in Toronto, but what I would say is how many people in this room were following on the news sites and the live blogging and looking at the minute-by-minute updates earlier this week. I know I was, because I'm running an organization which could be impacted by this. It's something that we're getting used to now. We're getting used to the idea that something can be happening somewhere else, and we in real time can actually understand what's happening. And as part of that, of course, constant connectivity is expected. And again, I don't just mean in a technological sense. I mean in the sense that we're all feeling as though we're part of something bigger and we're connected into that. And the way that I sense that is that when I was at the AAM conference earlier this year, for the first time in the Future of Museums session, they started talking about not having wireless in museums, but having places in museums where you couldn't get access to wireless, and that people might go there to relax and chill out and remove themselves from the constant connectivity that we are all experiencing. Okay. Everybody has trust issues. We're all looking to see who it is that we can trust. We're all looking to see who it is who we can take as a personal recommendation, and something will be good as a result of that. I think there's something in here for museums because we've always known that museums occupy a place that is trusted by people. Similarly, authenticity is prized. It's really prized by people. And again, I don't just mean in the sense of real or fake. I mean, feeling as if you've been part of an authentic experience is something that people set great store by. And lastly, I think that enjoyment is vital when time is at a premium. I don't know if you found this now, but years ago when I started working with interactive exhibits, we used to think about how long it would be before the exhibit had to respond before you'd walk away. And we worked out what those times were in terms of reaction times for those interactions. Those times have closed right down now. We all expect something to happen very, very quickly. And if it doesn't happen, we're on to the next thing. And you can say the same for a day out, spending time with your family. The idea that something, knowing that it's going to be enjoyable, is something which people are really cautious about committing to unless they've got that sense that it will be okay, or better than okay, it will be great. So, here's where I start to make things up. I think we're increasingly starting to see things in a series of snippets. The snippetization. I was practicing Cheryl earlier on and I still can't say it. The snippetization. Well, no, it's all going to pieces. I'll try it one more time. The snippetization of experiences is something that I think is a trend, again, that we are starting to learn how we negotiate this in museums. So we have everything from people now making comments about us in 140 characters or less, YouTube videos, which are 1, 2, 3 minutes, but might encapsulate some particular story or some particular conversation. But also, if you're going to be checking in 40 times a day, which was the latest statistic I heard for how often now, on average, people check their mobile or their smartphone, then it's going to be short. It's going to be short but sweet. And so the growth of blogs that are a paragraph long, the growth of being able to instantly understand and comprehend what something is about, this is something I think that we are starting to work out how we deal with this in our world of museums and culture. Okay, they get worse, as I should say, as we go through. The festivalization, at least I can say that one, the festivalization of programming. I was just hearing about Apocalypse-a-Loser. Fantastic. A wonderful example of how things are increasingly becoming a special occasion, and how if you create a whole season of something, you can perhaps take risks, but have a bigger audience and do some things that will be new and some things that will be tried and trusted, and people will understand that they should join in because it's just going to be here for perhaps a few days or a few weeks. That sense of how you might put things together in a different way, I think is everywhere. And I think, again, it's something that I've heard over the last few weeks and months gathering strength, and over the last day I've heard it here at this conference. This one's much more straightforward, the personalization of everything. In this world of information overload, the idea of being a curator has now become one of the coolest jobs on the planet. I was at a talk earlier this week at the Rotman School, a wonderful strategic thinker who I would encourage you to seek out, called Jan Liedtke, who I first met when I did the Getty Leadership Program years ago. and who is very interested in the way museums think and plan and change. I was talking to her because she came to Rotman Business School to give a presentation about the latest techniques that business can use to bring things to market. And one of the things that she talked about was curatorship. And afterwards, I was speaking to her, and she said, you know, I'm really worried. I'm really worried it's going to be like the word paradigm. We're going to kill it. The business community is going to take this word and it's going to kill it in the same way that that word, unfortunately, has moved and changed and lost its meaning in some ways. And I said, well, I really hope that doesn't happen because we've got a vested interest in that word, those of us who work in museums. But right now, we're wondering how we take advantage of the fact that people, when they have so much information around us, are looking to find somebody who can personalize that for them. They're quite often looking also to be able to learn how they can personalize things for themselves, and they can curate their own journey or their own experience or their own project. But above and beyond that, we know now how important it is to understand that our audience is not one size fits all, but that our audience comes in many shapes and sizes, and quite often their needs are not mutually exclusive, but perhaps only partially overlap, and that we need to be capable of providing different experiences which people can take and personalize for themselves. And the last one is the worst. I couldn't even make it a word. I kind of tried to go at forcing it together, but in the end, I decided I would stick with this. The betaization of products and services. That everything's beta now. Everything is a prototype. Everything is unfinished. Everything is starting off and having people join that conversation and make it better. I lay a lot of the responsibility for this at the door of Google. They have been running things in beta which the whole world has been using for many years, and we've all got used to. We've all actually grown and changed with Google to the extent that we hardly consider, I think, many of us, that it's actually a company now, that we are using its services, and we are part of helping make its services better. But I think this sense of everything being beta also flows through into many other things. People used to talk about the fact that people enjoyed sausages, but they didn't like to see the sausage making. I don't think that's true anymore. I mean, maybe not for sausages, but I think on the whole, people are much more interested in thinking about how things are made. And they're particularly interested if they can be part of the making of those things. And I think, again, that that's something which is a huge shift for us. So, what does this mean for museums? I think it means that something which, when I began my career in museums, a sense of creating something that was timeless, that was perfect, that we worked on for many, many months, that we kept amongst ourselves, and we finally released it to an audience only once we knew that nobody could see the gaps or how it had been put together. I think, and I say this with a sense almost of grieving and loss, I think that that's something which we should no longer aspire to achieve. I think that that's now not the marker of success that we should be looking for. However, I do think that if we can get it right, that collaborative, dynamic, works in progress can be just as good as that. And actually, I think in many cases in this new world, can be better. And I say this as the director and CEO of a museum, that if you walk into it today, and it's 3:45 on a Friday afternoon, it will be largely a beautiful, timeless, static experience, which many people spent many years making it feel perfect. But actually, if you come back tonight, first shameless plug for the ROM, if you come back tonight at about 7 o'clock onwards, what you'll see is a collaborative, dynamic, sometimes a bit messy, work in progress of Friday Night Live, where the museum will have switched modes, and we've learnt that we can create a better event that more people enjoy if we work with them to hone that event and work on it. So I think that actually right now, both of these things are actually existing side by side at the ROM. I think one of the challenges for us is how we celebrate what we've achieved and how we allow ourselves to embrace this as the new normal. So, with all that in mind, it's tempting to think that we kind of should just give up and go home. So here I am looking after this museum. It's wonderful, it's timeless, it's static. But I can't give up and go home because I think actually museums are incredibly important to people. And if I ever had any doubt about that, the 3 years that I've spent at the ROM, I've never known an experience before where so many people from across the whole community can tell me about their experience of coming to the ROM for the first time. I feel as though I have an awesome responsibility to take care of something which is a collective memory for the people of Ontario and indeed beyond that. And that actually it's our job to embrace this. And next year we have the perfect opportunity to do that because next year is our 100th birthday. So on March the 19th, 2014, it will be 100 years to the day since the then Governor-General, the Duke of Connaught, on a rather, from what we can make out from the photographs, indifferent March morning, came and opened the ROM for the first time. Here's what the ROM looked like then. And actually this really is a slightly sepia-tinged image because it's a postcard which I found online that somebody had sent to somebody else saying that they'd been to the ROM, which I now have at home and I think is a rather splendid thing to have because I'm, above all else, a museum curator. So this is what the ROM looked like in 1914. And for those of you who are familiar with the building, the front door was on Bloor. This front door is now a window, which has a rather spectacular bird sculpture in it. The building actually went down through Philosopher's Walk, and it was built right from the start on the basis of a master plan that it would eventually occupy the whole site out to University Avenue. And much of what you see today has built out that master plan, although like many museums, something happened in the 1960s and 70s, and the master plan changed at that point, and rather than build the next stage, the Louise Hawley-Stone Curatorial Centre was built at the back of the building, planetarium was built, and then, of course, as all of you know, over the last few years, the Michael Lee-Chin Crystal has taken its place. So one of the things that we have to think about for our 100th birthday is how we talk about the fact that the museum has grown and changed over that 100 years, and it's actually 4 different buildings that are together. This is the way that we're describing what we do now at the ROM. The ROM connects our visitors to their world and to each other. It's a very simple statement, but then I think it's important at times to be able to make something simple. And I think the idea that a museum is there for its audience, and it's there for its audience so that they can be inspired and be curious around our collections, and so doing can make connections to their world, whatever their interest is, and also through doing so can connect with each other. I think it's actually a very strong and powerful way of describing not just what the ROM does, but what many museums do. We're an encyclopedic museum. And one of the great challenges, I think, of being an encyclopedic museum is that people know you for who you are as an organization, but they don't necessarily know what you have. And when we asked our visitors, could they tell us about the collections at the ROM? Could they tell us about something that they knew we had at the ROM? Most people could tell us that we had dinosaurs. A number of people could tell us that we had ancient Egyptian mummies. And then after that, people really started to struggle. But they loved us, and they cared about us, and they wanted to know more about us. And so one of the things that we've done in time for our centennial, and as you can see from this slide, this is slide 45 of what I think was like an 80-slide presentation on branding, is that we've articulated 8 themes for the museum. They're not museum departments. They're not the way that we actually organize ourselves internally. They're part of our commitment to be audience-focused. What we say to our visitors is, these are the different things that you can choose to engage with at the ROM. You can choose to engage with them when you're walking through the door. You can choose to engage if you come to us online. Increasingly, if out in the community, you can choose to engage with us around these themes too. And what we will bring to bear is we will bring to bear our resources, our collections, our experts, in some cases our exhibitions and our galleries, our programs and events. And if you're interested in one of these areas, then come back and have another look, and you can get involved deeper and deeper and deeper. And so just to take one example, the Centre for Biodiversity, because we've called these centres because we want, like a centre of gravity, people to be drawn to them. The Centre of Biodiversity not only is about what you can see if you walk in through the doors at the museum in terms of the public galleries, it's about how we're bringing the research that we're doing all around the world to people in such a way that they can get involved with it. And it's about how, in partnership with other organizations, we're doing things such as our scientists getting out into the community. And in May, we ran, I think it was the world's largest BioBlitz at the time. More than 400 scientists, many, many volunteers, members of the community. We went, and in 24 hours, we surveyed the biodiversity of Rouge Park. And in doing so, we had a fantastic time. We identified, I think, more than 1,500 species, including some things that not only had never been seen in Rouge Park before, but had actually never been reported in Canada for over 100 years. And the people that I met at Rouge Park were so pleased that the ROM was out there in the community and that they understood now that we did these sorts of things, but that also they talked about how could they get more involved. And the great news is that alongside that 5-year management plan that they will build from that survey at Rouge Park with Parks Canada, we're now working out how over the next 5 years we could go around the whole green belt in Toronto and actually survey the biodiversity that is on everybody's doorsteps and then help the community reconnect with that. And I would just say we can't do that on our own. We will need partners, so talk to me afterwards. So that's just one example of the way this new thematic approach to the museum helps people get more involved, helps people learn about what's previously been hidden behind the scenes, and makes for a great experience. So here's how we, I think, are using what I identified as those trends to address our centennial. The first thing is we're not just doing one thing, we're actually for a whole year doing a variety of different things. Some of them risky, some of them quite traditional, some of them retrospective, some of them future-oriented. But we're actually seeing our centennial as a year-long festival to celebrate the achievements and think about what the museum should be and could be doing now. There's going to be snippets aplenty. We're going to be looking at what the founding items in the collections were, what key donors were. You'll be able to follow different trails through the museum. We'll be celebrating how particular collections came together. We'll be identifying some of those themes, in particular Canada, and helping you trace new ways to identify and link through to the ROM's collections, all in bite-sized pieces. There'll be a lot of personalization. Our curators through the centres are increasingly becoming front and centre, the way that we allow ourselves to be multi-voiced rather than have an institutional voice. But alongside that, we're going to run a whole series of heritage days where we invite different communities to come in and program the ROM. And something I just wanted to tell you about. I mentioned it to a couple of people here today already. We're running an online history project about the ROM called ROM Recollects, or ROM Recollects, if you like. And what we're doing here is we're collecting people's memories and their thoughts and their ideas about what the ROM has meant to them. Because I think if we collect all of those different statements together, we'll be able to see over 100 years the impact that this museum has had in the community, and we need to be able to measure and show our impact. And so whether you're a former staff member at the ROM, whether you came to us as a child, whether you've brought your own children to us, whether you have something that may be a bittersweet moment about the ROM, go online and let us know what your thought about the ROM is so that we can add that to the archive that's building up. I couldn't bring myself to put betaization again, so I've put this collaboration this time. But we're already doing this, but we're increasingly seeing the ROM not as that wonderful, timeless piece of perfection, but as a work in progress. So our beautiful galleries, we're looking to see how we can enrich them, how we can bring more storytelling in. We're looking to see how we can improve the wayfinding by asking strangers in the building to come and tell us what they can find and what they can't find. We're looking to see, as we build out a new learning strategy, how we can bring in the students and teachers and have them tell us how best we can use the ROM's resources. So, ultimately for me, ROM 100 will celebrate 100 years of achievement, but it'll be about the future. I think it's important for all of us that we can make a clear, confident statement that even in this changing world, our best years are ahead of us. They're not behind us, they're ahead of us. So I'm hoping that we'll continue to see lines of people waiting to come into the ROM. I think that also we have ways of constantly remaking and newly making relationships with the people across Ontario and beyond. And I just wanted to finish, so I wanted to save a little bit of time if there was for a question or two. I just wanted to finish by sowing a thought, which I know many of you are already talking about. We've got lots of anniversaries coming up, not just the ROMs, but we've got other things going on in 2014, 2015. And I wanted to think about 2017, because my sense is that all of us in 2017 can do something spectacular for Canada celebrating its 150th anniversary. And in an analogous way that I've just described, also make clear that our best years are ahead of us, both as this country, which I'm really proud to be working and living in, but also in terms of the contribution that the cultural sector can make to that. And so I wanted just to leave you with that thought, and I know it's something that's already being spoken about and there will be more conversations about, but I think that could be our big opportunity, you know? So thank you so much for listening to me on a Friday afternoon. I hope I've been able to capture some of the things that you've been talking about and play them back to you in a way that didn't have you checking your watch too many times.